Welcome to the Sean Trace Show. I have a really awesome guest for everyone today. Now, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Hi, I am Brian Sipe. I'm a specialty makeup artist here in Los Angeles, California.
And I was looking at, I found some of your work by a friend of my friend was working on The Mandalorian. And you have some absolutely amazing stuff that you did on that show. Now, can you tell me, because it's not just regular makeup, for people who might not know, you're doing like a lot of prosthetics, correct?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like, it's where I kind of started. That was my focus when I started in the business, going to school and wanting to learn, and actually moving to Los Angeles was to, just do the prosthetics, to do the, fun stuff. And, and I've been lucky enough to do it, I mean, I moved to California in 1985. So, professionally started working in 89, so, so it's been a good long haul. As for The Mandalorian, I mean, there's a lot of, obviously I'm there's a whole team, and there's different companies and stuff like that provide for the show as well. So, I can help sort that out if you ask a question about it.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, sure, it takes an army for any one production. It takes a whole host of people that come
for
together.
every department.
What type of how many people on a show like that? How many people are normally on the makeup team?
It depends. I mean, the first year we were a core group of 4. Myself, Alexi, Dimitriou, and then the hair for makeup, and then for the hair department was Maria Sandoval and Wendy Southard. And we were just, I mean, it was basically us. We started out slow. And the show started out a little bit slow, just to kind of, see how they would go. But we had some big days in there, and then we would just, we would grow, and we're all kind of guns for hire. We're all freelance, so you kind of reach out to whoever's available, and grow your army a couple of days, and then then everybody goes away. But I mean,
that's pretty awesome.
And this last season, we actually had, I think, like our core group was almost like 15, 16 people. There was they really kind of a whole bunch of characters.
That's really awesome. Now, I want to actually go back to, how did you get into this profession? How did you start studying for us? How did you get into this?
I think, growing up, I was always into like magic tricks. Nice. I guess the illusion, then staying up late and watching, midnight horror theater, or Saturday morning, sinister theater, whatever that was. And then, at a point, in the 80s when, the horror genre started to take off,
there was some great horror in the 80s.
That was kind of like the time. That was kind of like, rock and roll, I mean, it was our rock and roll, from there, I just would watch everything, and
nice.
And then I think it was the 81 redo of John Carpenter's The Thing is what really fascinated me. Just the way that the puppets, the makeups, everything about it was so unimaginable. It was just like over the top, and just the guy's chest opening up, bites his arms. It just like never ended.
Right.
And that's when I was just kind of like, wow, that's that was back in the day of videotape. So you'd go to the store, you'd rent the videotape, and I think I just like I kept that one out. I just kept re-renting it. And then my dad, actually, he traveled a lot for work. And I think he said going through an airport one time, he saw an issue of the Cinema Fantastique, with Rob Bottin on the cover.
Yeah.
And, in the crab leg head. And that was the one, so he picked it up for me because he knew I was watching that movie over and over and over. Young Rob Bottin, amazing, artist. Got the magazine, and you go through, and there was an artist. I think his name was Mike Plug, and he had done like these. They were always like these little kind of storyboard drawings of like how the effect was going to happen. Like this guy was going to be pushing,
that's awesome.
the head out, and that kind of stuff. And I think it was that moment that I kind of realized, like, wow, this is somebody's job, And I'm like, I like this stuff. This can be my job. Then after that, I just kind of, sunk my teeth in and just kind of pursued it as much as I could.
Were you going out and like purchasing your own supplies and trying things when you were a kid? Like, because I remember when I was a kid, like, the best I could get was some of those, the Halloween makeup, it's like a set of different 4 things. Like, where did you go to find stuff? Where were you looking?
I grew up in Hillsboro, Oregon, which is about, 20 minutes outside of Portland. There wasn't a lot. I think in the neighboring town, there was in Forest Grove, there was an actually like a stage, like a makeup and costume and stage store. And I remember going there. I think I bought latex and some fake blood, and I met this kid there. And we keep a relationship to this day. And that was back when I was 16 or 17. Awesome. But so. It was that, and then I go to the art store and I got some clay, and and I think I also at that time I picked up at one of the toy stores there was the Dick Smith, one of the greats of our industry. He had put out like this, it was a Pressman makeup kit kind of a thing where he had molds in there and you could make gelatin pieces, and he showed how you would glue them on and blend them off. And so that was kind of like my first, makeup kit, and way of making prosthetics. And
Yeah. That's really awesome. I'm a child of the 80s. I was born in 79. So I went through the 80s, and I understand, I remember I remember when I watched the movie Karate Kid, and I was like, I want to study martial arts, and it was just, it was like that thing that I wanted to do. There was nothing in my town. And, and there was like the next town over, we found like a Taekwondo school, and it was like, a long drive. So my parents kind of didn't do it. And I think that, the people that are coming up in these things now, everything's online, you
go in. Right. There's almost no reason anymore that you can't, get good at something unless you don't have a self-edit and you don't self-critique well. Mom and dad are always going to say it's beautiful, but
right.
It's pretty amazing the information. With any streaming channel, I was like, I'm trying to teach myself 3D stuff now, and it's like, nice. Jump on YouTube, and there's all these tutorials. It's like, wow, of course it's been there for years, but my son actually taught himself 3D stuff on Blender, just by watching tutorials. That's awesome. It's pretty amazing now, and for makeup, it can be hard because there's so much content. Not a lot of it's good, there's some that's, incredible, stellar. So it's hard, maybe for, the kid in Iowa to think, okay, this is what I want to do. Who do I follow? Who do I practice, after?
One of the reasons this popped up is on your Instagram I saw that you were posting about some of your friends had started this online learning, and I was just like, I thought that was so interesting because I was like, man, like during COVID, my daughter, we've been trying to I've had to homeschool, and suddenly I'm just like, oh my goodness, it's like, but the internet has been this golden resource, and we started her on piano, and I remember my piano classes. My piano classes were horrible. It was with the pastor's wife, and bless her heart, she was a sweet old lady, but she couldn't teach piano to save her life.
Where did you grow up?
She would give us. I grew up all over the States. My dad was from the UK, and my mom's from the US, and I lived in Massachusetts, North Carolina, Tennessee, Idaho, Southern California, Texas, Northern California, and now I live in Southeast Asia. But when I was learning piano, I was up in Idaho. There was this little old lady, and she tottered around, and she had the best candy at her house. But she couldn't teach piano, and now there's this app called Simply Piano, and it's just it's gamified. The kids are just my daughter loves it, and they've got this. It's Guitar Hero, where you see the little dots streaming down. I was like, oh my gosh, man! If they had had this when I was a kid, I would have killed it. But go ahead, and I think about these careers like going into makeup or. Again, I've had last night I had my friend Andrew Rollins, who is a director of photography on a lot of Marvel movies and such, and he's just a really cool guy. And he was talking about how, these guys coming up now on the camera side too. It's just stuff is accessible. Yeah. You can get stuff, but before it wasn't.
You can shoot projects on your iPhone, or
right,
or digital camera, SLR. I mean, it's just like and for anybody on the production side, the directing side, DP side, I mean, it's just and again, if the important thing is telling the story, you can. Yes. There's no reason that you can't, because everything's out there, everything, I mean, when I was coming up, and learning. There was one book, and it was Richard Corson's. It was version 5 of Richard Corson. Richard Corson's stage makeup book, or something or stage theater craft, and it covered everything. And then makeup was a section in there, and it was wow, okay, And then then there were magazines, and you just kind of get the magazines and kind of. They talk, sometimes the artist would talk about how they did something, and then you're just kind of trying to figure it out. And then things, in the 80s started to open up, and makeup schools started to open up, and, I think they saw that this was, a viable business all of a sudden.
Yeah. Did you go and then do additional training, or were you completely self-taught?
I did go to a place in Los Angeles. I think I saw the ad in the back of the Fangoria magazine for a school. Nice. And called and talked to the guy, signed up. I think I was the very first person to call and sign up, and then I think January of '85 is when I packed up my car and drove to California.
That's really awesome. Now you've worked. I was looking at your IMDb, and you've worked on everything, man. It's really some of my favorite movies. What would?
No, I've been very fortunate, incredibly fortunate to have a career that I've had.
What were some of your favorites?
It's hard to say. I get asked that question, and each one, all the projects, I mean, it's makeup, so it's kind of it's basically the same thing, but each one presents everything is always going to be, there's going to be an issue, or a problem that you have to solve. Okay. So that's what makes it fresh. It keeps it fresh. But I don't know. I mean, I'm truly proud of quite a few projects. I think Benjamin Button was a project that I worked on that I'm really proud of. Passion of the Christ, my involvement in that.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask about Passion of the Christ. That seems like it must have been a really involved project.
It was. And the company that I was working for at the time, Captive Audience, a guy named Keith Vanderlaan owned that company. He was able to talk Mel, and we had kind of a relationship with Mel with some other films, and the company did not only the makeup effects but the digital effects. So they covered everything, and it worked really well just to kind of have the digital building was literally across the street, and so then it was it was easy to talk to each other and figure out like, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? So that was very rewarding, and the movie's just good. The movie's really good. And then it's hard. I'm proud of a lot of the work that we've done. From Guardians to Mandalorian. I was lucky enough to get together and put together some great teams, and we rocked it out.
What was one of the most challenging prosthetics or characters that you worked on?
That's a good question. I always talk about like one of the hardest things I ever had to try and figure out was for Ali. I was doing Will Smith.
Okay. I saw Ali. That was one that because he, that's a really interesting movie, and he gets pretty beat up in that fight.
So it's again, captive audience. The company I was working for, we were responsible for like the fight makeups and damage. And the one thing that we had to do was, Ali's ears were pretty pinned back to his head. Will's are not. So we had to kind of like figure a way to glue his ears back. And, normally you would just kind of put the medical adhesive on his ear and on the back of his head. And, but it would always, the cartilage in his ears were so strong. It would just always pop out. And it took us a while, it took me a while to figure out how to do it. And it became like this, using two different kinds of glues and two different kinds of prosthetics to make it all work. But that was like, It was, it's funny, his ears. That was like one of the hardest things that you had to figure out.
Well, that's an interesting thing. Is like, one of the things that I think that people who are not in film don't realize is that sometimes some of the things that you would never think about can be things that are really logistical challenges that, when they're going in are, one of the best examples my friend talked about last night was like on La La Land, why the new technology that they're using in The Mandalorian is so great, where you're shooting on that big screen, because like on La La Land, that sunrise shot, they had 20 minutes to nail it. And people are
they might have been shooting on film too. That would have been pretty neat. It's interesting because I'm trying to remember. I remember hearing a story too of a film that was trying to do something similar, and they missed it a few times, so they had to come back, and they had to come back. So it's like, oh, okay. I don't know if it was like on the Revenant or something, or
Oh man.
Out in the middle of snow, trying to get like some sunrise shot out in the middle. I don't know. Maybe I think it was
that must have been intense. I heard the Revenant was a pretty intense shoot, because it was out in the elements.
I've heard as well. I didn't work on that project, but I know some of the guys Legacy Effects did some of the damage stuff and some of the animal damage stuff. And it, I remember, I think the guy was out there, Jason was out there for a long time.
Well, a question for you, because this is something that I was watching the behind the scenes for some of the stuff on The Mandalorian, and the one I was watching some of the stuff on WandaVision, and it's really interesting that how is makeup blending into like visual effects, because like some of the you'll see on like sometimes some of the stuff is done in post, right? And so How does that work now? How do you guys, set that? Is there a lot of communication or in pre-production between your department and the VFX
Yeah, yeah,
department?
absolutely. I mean, there has to be, I mean, just so that we
Yeah.
can, hopefully we have time to, have meetings prior to the shoot date. And then,
Right.
and it is just trying to figure out, okay, that's like, what's going to be the best way to do this. It's like, if you guys
Mm.
can go, I mean, actually, a good example actually would be End Endgame. At the end with
Yeah.
Old Age Cap. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
again, the VFX company, was talking to Legacy Effects because they were the ones who built a lot of the, we did the stuff. They created the stuff for the Guardians, as well as
Hmm.
they were going to create the prosthetics for Captain America. Um, and the discussion was, it's like, well, we can do a certain amount of things, like the digital
Yeah.
department. He goes, but the places where we lack, some of the subtlety would be like around the eyes, something in the neck or like a swallow. I mean, there's certain things so that, so we built, they built kind of a partial makeup.
Interesting.
We think we built like a neck and a forehead, eye bags. We did almost everything but like a nose and a cheek and cheeks. And then like that they felt confident that they could do, and they would get like the gravity and the weight. And then, but there was like just some subtle stuff that would happen around the eyes that they, wanted to make sure that got kind of captured in a way with an old age piece on there. And
Oh, wow.
so yeah, I mean, it's just it's talks. It's just going back and forth, and then Shane Mahan was the one that was kind of one of the owners at Legacy that points that up with I think it was Lola, the visual effects company, and yeah, it's just kind of like I mean. It's great, and actually on The Mandalorian, there's the visual effects department, American Fisher Bluff. I mean, it's it's great when you have a VFX department that gets the value of both. Because sometimes, and
Yeah.
the same thing. Sometimes it's either the makeup, they're like, we can do it, or the VFX, we can do it. But it really does. Sometimes, that hand holding, you can produce, something pretty amazing.
That's really awesome. No, one of the things that I always just think about is when I watch, some of these shows or just some of the stuff that has really great, prosthetics and makeup. Where do you guys go for inspiration? Where do you go to like think up some of these character designs? Are these things that you're coming up with? Or are you getting something that someone's handed to you? And how do you come up with some of these?
I mean, I guess it depends on the show. It depends on the studio.
Yeah.
Something, Marvel and DC. I mean, they've got, their own
It's very specific.
in-house, department artists that kind of create the designs, and then like the basic design, and then like, say for Apocalypse or something like that. They created the design, and then it gets sent out to the company. Legacy Effects again did that show, and I helped run the show on set. The Scott Patton, who was one of the artists there, would then take the Apocalypse design that production has sent us, and then like, oh, who's the actor? Oscar Isaac. Okay, now it's like, okay, now it's kind of make it look like Oscar, and there's that back and forth, and then once it gets into a sculpture phase, then sometimes some of the reality of the actor's real estate, comes in. So then you have, everything kind of slightly adjusts here and there. I mean, the big shows like that, they've already kind of got it nailed down and they know what they want. Sometimes you get a show, like some of the smaller shows where you can kind of, they're asking, it's like, well, yeah, help us design it. What do we need? What do we want to do? And, I don't know. I mean, nature's always a great place to get inspiration. because there's so much stuff that we don't know, that we don't see. You go to the bottom of the ocean,
Right.
You go deep in the forest somewhere. I mean, it's amazing. How
It looked like the aliens from the Alien trilogy. It was I think it was like a praying mantis or something. That was like kind of an inspiration there.
I think. I mean,
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's really awesome. Now, as you so say on a big show, like let's say Guardians, or a film production, from getting the concept and you start creating the prosthetics and stuff, you're working off of models and off of what's the process from concept to getting it onto the actor?
It goes from design, then you get the actor in. You might do a scan to get his body, if you're going to do something to affect his body, or you do a cast of his head, his hands, his arms. You just make a mold, and then we, create positives that we can sculpt on. And then from there, it's, the sculpture, mold that. And then there's a department that would, run the skins, run the prosthetics, whether it be in foam latex or silicone. And then from there, it's, it can be pre-painted in the shop maybe, or pre-painted on set, and then, it goes on the actor.
Nice. Are there any interesting new technologies that are changing the game? I mean, are there things like 3D printing, or is there anything else
Everything.
That's changing
everything? I mean, from the 80s, that's, people were just using foam latex. Then the experimentation with like gelatin had happened before that, and it kind of started to become a little bit more prevalent. And then I think it was the mid-90s is when silicone prosthetics started kind of taking shape, everything's changing, and the 3D printing is changing things too. I mean, there's some people out there who are, instead of doing the sculpture, they'll go straight from like, here's the design on the actor, and then they can actually, from there they'll take the digital sculpture and then like make the mold, print the mold, and then print the positive, and then make the prosthetics right out of that. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, and it. I'm not sure if it's faster. I'm not sure if it's time efficient yet. Yeah. I mean, I think people are still discovering that. But there are some shows, I think, like SNL. I think they do it that way, because they don't know, they can't have an actor. It's easy for like 15 minutes to like scan the actor rather than, 2 hours to have them sit there and prep and bald cap and do all this stuff and then do a mold of them. I mean, some of the technology is pretty cool. It's coming out.
Yeah, but you're still in the process of seeing if it's gonna, if it's beneficial versus if it's just kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, there is that. I mean, there's, I guess, at a point there's some things where you can go like, yeah, I did that. I know that there was I was talking to a guy and there was a show that was happening, and I guess they were going to do like this giant, like creature head, and I mean, ginormous, and even with like the biggest printers that they have right now, you can only print so big. So if you've got a head that's 3 to 4 feet, you've got to cut it down into whatever your print bed can do, which then might be, okay, we've got to print 20 pieces that we then later assemble. Like a little model kit or a big model kit. And then, and they did that. This is what this particular company had done. And I remember I asked the guy, it's just like, so how long did that take? And like each piece, sometimes a piece might take 30 hours. And it's like, okay. So,
oh my God.
You have 20 of those, and that's how many hours? And then, okay, it's like, well, what is that, like 600 hours? I don't know. It's just like, okay, well, could you have just had a traditional sculptor? Like you could, there's elite sculptors out there. You probably could have brought in 2 of them, thrown them at it for a week, and it would have been done,
Yeah.
Maybe, so that's where, it's we're finding it out. I mean, the technology would grow, and things will get better, things will get faster. The printers are already getting bigger and bigger. So I think it will catch up to the point where we do need it. And, at that point, all of this stuff that we're doing now is prep to, practice to get us to that next level.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to, like, from the camera side, I'm I'm blown away by how much smaller the cameras are getting, and then like the FPV stuff, like these crazy high speed drones. It's changing the game. And so it is interesting how technology can change the game. But I'm a film purist. I love taking photography, like film photos. And so I grew up with a dad as a photographer. I love it. And I don't know why. I just feel like I take better pictures. But one of the things is that with the older technology, it forces me to pay attention to what I'm doing.
I do. That is an inherent issue, I think, seemingly today. I mean, it's the same thing, like, say, for like a photo shoot, because if it was film, or, a film shoot, there's only so many takes that the director might do, or, or that might, photographer might take of the model. But now that it's digital, and it really doesn't cost anything to develop, then it's just like, take 100, take 101, take 102, and then, there's like it's almost like there was a trap door opened up for safety, so that it's just like, well, I'll just point and click and, I'll get it in there somewhere. Rather than just like what you said, it's not like the Ansel Adams who would like hike out somewhere and just like sit there and wait for a moment,
right.
Right. Now maybe you could have somebody hike out there, set up a camera, go back home, sit by the fire, drink coffee, and look at it on his iPhone, and then go like click, click.
That's totally true. But there's probably more likely there's going to be 12 influencers out there like this, know.
but there's, the good side of it too, though, is that, I think
it's
accessible, and, like movies, some of the movies being made today probably wouldn't have been made if it were, with the expense of film, with the expense of, and everything that it was. But now that we can do things with a camera this big and on a drone, it's really the creativity does get opened up, and then I think that there is that, a little bit of that bit of okay, let's just keep shooting, but now it can be, let's send it up on a drone, and he's going to ride his bike, and then we're going to do that follow drone thing, where, and it's just like
exactly. Well, I think that's the thing that I love is, if you wanted to make a film in the 80s, there was definitely a financial, if you're not, you can make it on VHS or Betamax. What I mean? If you're right? Like, how are you going to cut that? Cutting between different VHS cassettes. I mean, I knew people who tried to do it, but it was obviously amateur, like majorly amateur. And to get to that next level, like, it was prohibitively expensive, and there was this bottleneck. And now it's not there. Like, that's one of the things the content creators. My friend runs an acting school in Denmark, and she handles a bunch of A-list talent in Europe. And what she did during the pandemic was to create a creator line, because there is this new movement of these creators that are also filmmakers, and that if they can be trained and say, hey, you guys are already doing this, you might as well learn storytelling and learn how to just put a story together, get some solid actors, and it's, and the stuff they're creating is amazing. Like, it was absolutely amazing. And it's just a bunch of amateur people, but you got an iPhone.
Yeah.
You can do it.
I mean, again, there's the only thing holding any of them back would just be themselves. I remember in my younger days, me and a couple of friends, we were always wanted to make something, but it was just like, oh yeah, but we need like a jib. We need a jib arm, and then we need a dolly track. So it's like, okay, then we need a Steadicam, and like we're building our own Steadicam. I mean, or it's like we got to wait till we can afford to buy a jib. We just
now that you get that gimbal,
yeah. I just put on a drum.
I mean, you don't even need a gimbal half the time because the crazy cameras are stabilized. You know what I mean? Everything's it's nuts. I mean, sure, it's helpful, but yeah, it's just awesome. Now, but one of the things though is that with some of these productions that I have noticed, the camera stuff is accessible, but I still notice when people are doing bad makeup because. You know what I mean? And that's what I wanted to ask you about. Like, have you seen like a larger talent pool getting into this? Is there a lot more people that are now heading down this path and saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go down this career"?
I mean, there are still, which is amazing. Because you think like some of them would want to maybe veer off into the VFX world, but there's still quite a few makeup schools out there, and each cycle, they might have, like 20 kids in each cycle. I mean, every cycle happens every, 4 months, 5 months, So, I mean, wow. They're getting kicked out of the schools, I mean, whether they go to work at the Mac counter or, make their way into, film or TV, it just depends. But, but yeah, I mean, there's, but there is a lot of people, I mean, right now too, we're at a weird time in Hollywood, like, all of a sudden it became really busy. So really?
Post COVID, it just gets really busy.
But the like everybody's working. I'm calling around. It's like, hey, you busy? You busy? Like, yep. I was like, I got 2 jobs.
Wow.
And it's great. It's great.
That's awesome. It's interesting. Did you notice that working in hair and makeup? That's an area that is very in close proximity to people. Were there a lot of changes that had to happen post COVID?
Yes. The frustrating thing was that there was no standard. But you think there would be, it's just kind of like, I don't know, there's got to be a standard to, create Coca-Cola. They got one formula. There's a standard to, how you, I don't know, you need to like wave the plane in, I don't know. But like with COVID, it was like every studio had their own version of their protocol. And even within like a studio, different projects had their own protocols that were different, even if it was under the umbrella of, so it's like, how's that working? It's like, shouldn't we all just be doing the same thing? And for us, the makeup and hair, early on, we had to work, some of the shows, luckily I didn't have to work, I didn't work on one of those, but people were wearing like full on like smocks, and then you had you had to wear
the hazmat suits.
Almost, it was, the face shields and the masks, and some shows had people wear gloves. It was just like which luckily, we didn't have to. We did find a solution to not having to wear gloves, because everything that we do can be just tactile. Trying to like glue something to somebody's face. You need like that, minute sensory touch. So
what are some of the movies that you go to for inspiration? Like, if you want to go back and say, hey, I want to watch something that's gonna give me some positive vibes, for your creativity.
I mean, it's funny because like I guess some of the movies that I love to go back and watch aren't, I guess if it's for reference, that's one thing, but the movies that I just have to go back and watch,
What do you like to watch? We'll start with that.
I mean, some of my most favorite movies are, the original Willy Wonka,
nice. With Gene Wilder, right?
Gene Wilder. It's funny, like some of them I think don't even have crazy makeup in it. The Cinema Paradiso was one of my most favorite movies.
Yeah.
Back to the Future, The Professional. I mean, those are the movies that like, the ones that you're flipping through the channel and it's on, you just stop. And you're like, okay, everything else is done. Everything else is gone, and I'm just going to stay and watch this.
Back to the Future 1 and 3. I see them on. They stay on.
It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, that's such a great movie. It's about those uplifting movies.
Now, what are some of the movies that you would say for people who are coming up in makeup and prosthetics? What are the movies that you must watch? What should someone go study?
I mean, there's quite a few. I mean, it's funny because there's like this, like that evolution of man, from apes to pavements, Neanderthals. There's almost like the same evolution that happens with makeup artists. Like some of us, a lot of us sometimes, especially the special effects makeup artists, you get into it because of the gore. Those blood and guts and the horror movies and stuff, and that's really cool. And then you kind of graduate to, maybe it's like, I'm going to sculpt a gorilla, or I'm going to do something like that, and then it's like to the old age, and then and it's like and then you kind of come back around to like, I'm going to do a beauty makeup, It's I think it's a thing where your skills, hopefully you're growing, and then you're having your skills adjust with your growth, and your tastes, because like with blood and guts or zombies or monsters, anything like that, it's always right.
Hello.
I think you froze.
You there still? We're back.
Okay.
We're back.
Okay. We'll just end up, with blood and guts, monsters. It's always right. Because who's to say that that's not right? When you get to see things like, a gorilla, or any kind of an animal to an old age person. It's like we all know what that looks like, so you really have to like nail it. Beauty makeups are a whole other thing, but but I think any makeup that you look at someone like the pioneers that we've had in our industry, going all the way back to say like John Chambers, Lon Chaney. You can watch anything that Lon Chaney did, and he always did something to himself. Back in the day. John Chambers, The Planet of the Apes. I mean, there's so many like iconic makeups or makeup things that Dick Smith, from Taxi Driver to Little Big Man to Altered States. Or Rick Baker, Rob Bottin, Rick Cannon, Steve Johnson, all these people. You look at some of these pioneers and look at something that they've done. I would say look them up. It's not so much the film, but like it's like you follow the artists.
Look them up
because then you can kind of see like how they grew, and you can just and you emulate. I think that's where you take that YouTube video. Take the information, take some of the techniques, take some of the materials, the tools, and then you emulate what Steve Johnson did in Big Trouble in Little China. Then you can kind of like, well, did what I do look just like his? And hopefully people have I think the hardest thing is if you don't have like a really great self critique, that's like one of the hardest things. It's like, it's great, I love it. It's like that looks nothing like it. It looks like Don Reynolds. So I would say follow the artists.
Well, it's one thing that you pointed out twice today that I do think is an interesting point. I knew this one girl, and she was the nicest person I ever know. She is literally one of the sweetest people on the planet. And she always wanted to be a singer. And she would sing at public events, and she would sing on shows, and she'd go to these places, to these live events. Love her to death, no judgment. But she could not sing. Yeah. It was just like, you know, and that was one of the things that I think that I never realized how many people have a very major lack of ability to, you know, self-evaluate. Until I watched the TV show American Idol for the first time. And, you know, that whole group of failures, like there were people, and it was painful to watch, because a lot of them, they didn't get it. Like they were like, you mean I'm not good? Like,
Harry says I'm great. You know, it's just like, I mean,
that's it.
Yeah. You know, I mean, same thing in any artistic field. I think the same thing in any, you know, where anything is subjective. You know, there's going to be these levels of, you know, people either don't know what's good or bad, or they, you know, want to lie, you know, to not hurt their feelings, or, you know, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, but thank God there's auto-tune. So,
right.
So yeah, I mean, it is, I find that is the hardest thing. And sometimes, you know, like I'll teach classes, or, you know, there will be some people who, even from like Instagram or something like that, that's just like, oh, you know, send me pictures and want me to critique the work. And, you know, it's hard too, because, you know, as artists, they get very defensive, you know, because they just they feel that they poured everything out into this piece, which, you know, expresses their soul and, you know, ascent to heaven or whatever it's going to be. But it's, you know, so that's where they just get really protective. Like one of the things I do, I was teaching a class in Australia on how to sculpt wounds and mold them, and, you know, fabricate them and then apply them. And so the first day I would have everybody start their sculptures, you know, and then, you know, I kind of go around and see, like, right when they're all like 3/4 like to done, then I'll be like, okay, great. Take this tool. Everybody's got this tool, and just scrape them off. And you know, it was kind of funny to see the people that would just be like deer in headlights, like, did he really just say that? You know, and it's just like, no, this is, you know, this is purposeful. You know, it's, you know, your shit stinks. You know, the director or the producer might come in and go, no, I don't like that. I want to do something like this instead. You know, and it's not, everything is not, can't be so precious, you know, and you have to be able to, self-evaluate, is this good or bad? And then, and just be like, okay, gotta let it go, scrape it off. And then, and usually, like, when you go at something like that a second time, it's better, you know, because you've done it once, it's gonna come to you easier, and it'll go faster, and you'll kind of, you'll find some other things out of it that make it maybe look a little bit more organic, a little bit more realistic. But it was always kind of like a fun moment just to see the look on my face. But I've had a couple of people just like, no, I'm not going to.
That's awesome. Yeah, I reminds me of, you know, I think all of us like want to preserve that. I remember the other day I was having my daughter make these little Play-Doh. We were learning some words for homeschool, you know, and she had to make these little, like, I wanted to make it fun, so she was learning sight words, and, you know, I said, okay, we're going to make these little zombies, and then you smash the zombie with the correct word. Yeah. My daughter likes zombie stuff, so, but she made these little zombies, and she's like, I was like, now smash them. She's like, I don't want to. No, I'm not smashing this. You're like, what are you talking about, Dad? No. She's just like her mom, so she was pretty feisty with it too. So, if you had advice for aspiring makeup artists, what type of advice would you give them? People coming up through the ranks right now.
I mean, I guess to iterate some of the stuff that I've already said is one would be to hone that self-evaluation. Be hard on yourself. If you're going to a school, make sure the teachers are hard on you. Because sometimes, and I've spoken at some schools, and I tell this to the students with teachers and owners in the room. It's just like, make them make you work. You are paying them a lot of money to teach you, so make sure that you're learning. Make sure that they're making you work, and not just kind of patting you on the head and saying you're great, just like mom and dad did, and maybe you're not. I mean, albeit we all know that they're beginners, and we know that they're going to be producing a certain standard, but there's also nothing wrong with wanting to push them a little bit more. It's always like, where you get greatness is when somebody is able to just do a little bit more than what would normally be given. And another thing that I always kind of say is, to just be like, what are you doing tomorrow night? I always ask the question, what are you doing tomorrow night? It's Friday night. What are you going to do? I'm going to the pub. I got a birthday party. I got this. I'm going to binge watch The Office again, the whole 18 episode series or whatever, and it'd be like, okay. And then like one person might go like, oh, I'm going to go, I got a gig I'm going to go do, or I'm going to go home and sculpt. It's like, okay, those are the two people that are going to make it, It's, like we all have the same 24 hours in a day. So it's like, what are you going to do with yours? It's how much effort that you want to put in is the reward that you'll get back. And some people don't understand that when they're like, wow, I can't make it. I'm not in the union yet. I'm not this, I'm not that. And it's just like, well, what did you do Friday night? Did you practice? Did you, have your mom sit down and do a makeup on her, or have your dad sit down and do a beauty makeup on him, and, put lashes on him, anything. It's stuff that you just need to keep going, and along those lines, it's, I'll tell students too, it's just like, okay, everybody who's like, came to this talk, it's like, look at everybody, look at the person next to you, look at the person across the road. It's like all these people right now, they're your competition. You're all going to graduate. Yep. They're your competition. Yep. Every single one of you needs to outshine the person next to them if you want that job. Yeah. And how are you going to do that? It's just going to be practice. So that's what I would say. I do so.
I love that. I think that's awesome, because I think some of the biggest one of the things that, and I might be weird, I'm not going to dive down this too much because I don't want to get written off by the video game industry, but I've never been a huge fan of video games, simply because for me, I always have that thought process, like, that's an hour or 2 hours I don't get back.
Yeah, for sure.
That I don't get back. You know what I mean? And it's so easy to deep dive, or whether it be that or social media, any time.
Netflix. Netflix, like literally, and the reason why I said it earlier is I think I have 3 kids, and they've all probably watched from beginning to the very last episode of The Office like 3 times. And I don't know how many, what was that, 12 seasons? That, So,
would you ever... Wow. There was that book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it was a book about finance, but there was an interesting thing that he broke down. And I love this thing. Like, he breaks down asset versus liability. And anything that you buy, he kind of puts into the category of an asset, something that's going to work to make you money. So, it could be like you go and buy a book about learning makeup. That could be an asset. Even though you're losing money, it's going to make you money in the back end. You know what I mean? And one of the things that I'd like to expand that out into is that ways that we invest our time can also be an asset or a liability. And I think that that's something that, if I'm looking on Instagram because I'm doing research for who I want to try to get onto my podcast, that could be an asset, an investment of my time. However, if I'm just like, oh, puppies,
aliens, oh, look at that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I do like is that whenever they decided to come up with that update for the iPhone where it tells you your times that you spend on everything,
Right.
it's like, oh my God.
Oh,
I can't believe I spent 20 hours.
You've had 13 hours today on Facebook.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's I mean, as incredible as that invention was, it's also probably one of the most detrimental things that we have now. I'm as guilty as everybody, as anybody. But but once you kind of realize that, then you kind of try. It's like getting rid of an addiction. It's just kind of like you kind of start to wean yourself off, and which is just pretty freeing. It's pretty cool. I think it's
The other night when Facebook crashed, I was just like, I can sleep. It was so nice. It was the middle of the night for me, and I was just like, oh, no alerts, no beeping. It was awesome. Now, if you had Aladdin's lamp and you could wish for anything for yourself in relation to kind of some work stuff, what would you wish to work on or do?
I don't know. Like we started the show out with, I mean, I've had a pretty good fortunate career, where, I practiced to the point where, you get yourself ready to be able to say yes, so that when somebody comes to you and says, hey, you want this job, or can you do this? You're just like, yes, and hopefully, you've got enough stuff under your belt that you can, jump into it. There's the anomaly of people who have no idea and just say yes and then figure it out. But yeah, I mean, I've worked on so many great franchises. I've worked on so many things, and and with Mandalorian, kind of, cherry on top, working on Star Wars, which is again, one of the things too that we all grew up with, and it's like, wow, okay,
for an 80s kid working on Star Wars.
I mean, it's pretty cool to do that, especially it's being done here, because usually it's always done in the UK. And so, I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, I'm, I guess wait and see what comes along. And, I mean, I seem to have, checked off a lot of good boxes, and I'm pretty content with that.
That's awesome, man. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on tonight. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Again, sorry for any scheduling snafus, man.
No.
Hopefully it wasn't too painful.
Nope, not at all. I was up.